The apex species, the galaxy, had many dangers. Black holes swallowed light. Supernovas burned everything near them. Planets crushed anything that landed on them. But even in such a vast and violent universe, one species stood above the rest in fear and power. Their name was known in whispers across systems. Their ships moved like shadows. Their arrival meant only two things: surrender or destruction. They were called the Draconian, on a planet where the sky cracked with lightning every hour, and beasts twice the size of warships roamed the land. The Draconian were shaped by survival. Their world had no kindness. Rivers boiled in heat. Storms tore mountains apart, yet they grew stronger. Claws turned to tools. Fire turned into weapons. Fear turned into conquest. By the time they left their homeworld, they had already destroyed 10 of their own cities just for training in the Galactic Council. No one questioned the Draconian seat. They did not debate, they declared. If they said a planet belonged to them, it was given without a fight. Even the most powerful empires stayed quiet when Draconian ships passed nearby. For cycles upon cycles, they believed they were alone at the top. The most feared, the deadliest. The true Deathworlders. Day, a strange signal was caught by a listening post on the edge of Draconian space. It was old and weak, coming from a small system hidden behind a dying star. The data was odd. One of the moons had a strange pattern of light. Not machine, not nature, something different. Something intelligent. The Draconian High Command became curious, not fearful. They never felt fear. Curiosity was rare in them. It only came when they sensed something worth destroying. The scout ship was sent to that system. It was a small mission, routine, nothing special. The crew joked about the trip. A dead world, a broken signal. Maybe another lost species waiting to be wiped. They entered the system and approached the third planet from the star. That planet was called Earth. The first thing the crew noticed was how unstable the planet seemed. Tectonic plates moved under its surface like living things. Volcanoes were active. The weather was violent. Hurricanes formed and faded quickly. Ice covered one part while fire baked another. Yet the planet was full of life. That alone was strange. Life usually avoided chaos. But here, life had embraced it. The crew sent drones into the atmosphere. One was destroyed by lightning. Another was swallowed by a giant sea creature. A third landed in a forest where plants seemed to fight each other for space. Nothing made sense. Life here was not only surviving, it was thriving in places where life should never exist. And then they saw humans. At first, they looked weak. No claws, no scales. Soft skin, small size. But the crew kept watching. They saw humans climb frozen mountains without help. They saw them swim across angry seas. They saw them fight wars with fire and metal. They saw them walk through deserts with no food and still live. One human carried another on his back through a storm without stopping. Another jumped into fire to save a stranger. These actions were not normal. These were not just survivors. These were creatures who refused to give up even when nature itself tried to break them. The commander of the scout ship watched in silence. The crew grew quiet too. Something was wrong. They had studied thousands of species. None had this kind of will. None had this mix of madness and purpose. The Draconian knew how to crush bones and break walls. But this was something different. These humans had no claws. Yet they hunted beasts. They had no wings, yet they flew through storms. They had no poison, yet they built weapons that could burn cities. One of the drones got too close to a human settlement. It was seen. A young human pointed at it and called others. They did not run. They did not hide. They grabbed strange tools and prepared to attack. The drone pulled back. The humans chased it. The scout ship pulled it offline to avoid contact. The Draconian commander stared at the world below. This was no simple life form. This was a species born from chaos but not controlled by it. They had shaped their own path. They were not afraid of storms or beasts or even machines in the sky. The signal they had received was no accident. It was a message. A call, not for help, not for mercy, but something else. A challenge. The crew reviewed the data again and again. Earth was not a death world by design. It was a death world by accident. But humans had turned it into a home. They had turned fire into warmth and danger into strength. The commander sent a report to the High Command. It was short. Only a few words. This world is alive. The species is aware. Proceed with caution. Fear may be required. It was the first time in Dravari history that such a message was sent. The High Command did not laugh. They did not mock. They waited. For the first time in centuries, the Dravari had found something they did not fully understand and deep in their hearts. Though they would never say it, a cold thought crept in. Maybe they were not the only Deathworlders. After all, maybe they were not the deadliest thing in the stars. Maybe humans were worse. First contact. The Dravari High Command approved a second mission without delay. This time it was not a small scout ship, but a larger vessel carrying soldiers, scientists, and specialists trained in first contact protocols. The purpose was not peace or learning. The Dravari never approached unknown species with kindness. Their goal was always the same: study weakness and prepare for control. As the ship approached Earth, its sensors picked up strange patterns. Satellite signals circled the planet. Radio waves moved in complex sequences. Human languages were flowing through space. The Dravari tried to decode them. Some made sense. Others were emotional in a way that puzzled the crew. Humans spoke with reason, but also with something else, something deeper. They told stories. They sang songs. They argued with passion. They remembered pain. These sounds carried not only meaning but feeling. One of the scientists said the humans used emotion as a weapon. The commander said emotion was weakness. Yet they both kept listening. They watched old broadcasts and war footage. They saw humans in conflict with each other. They saw cities fall and rise again. They saw loss followed by hope. Again and again, these creatures had no single ruler, no united voice. Yet they kept moving forward as if something inside them refused to stop. The Dravari ship entered Earth orbit. Hidden behind the shadow of the moon, it released a fleet of small probes. Each was silent and fast, slipping into the sky unnoticed. They flew over deserts and jungles and oceans. They studied the air and the water and the ground. They collected samples. They measured heat and pressure. They watched human life from above. A probe hovered over a battlefield where soldiers trained under the sun. It watched a drill as humans moved in perfect timing. They wore no armor like the Dravari, yet their eyes showed focus sharper than steel. Another probe entered a cold forest and found humans testing machines that moved through snow like shadows. In cities, humans built towers that reached into the clouds. They used light and fire as tools. They lived in chaos but created order from it. The more the Dravari watched, the less they spoke. There was something different about Earth, something impossible. The environment changed every hour. The weather attacked without warning. Predators hunted without mercy. Yet humans walked freely among all of it. They had no fangs or scales or claws. Still they ruled over beasts and nature alike. In one area, a volcano erupted and lava flowed down the side of a mountain. The probe recorded everything. Buildings were destroyed. Trees turned to ash. Yet humans stayed behind to help others escape. One carried a child on their back through smoke. Another drove a truck into danger to pull others out, not for reward, not for glory, just because it had to be done. The probe returned with the recording. The crew watched in silence. The commander asked why the human risked his life. The scientist answered that humans had something called instinct. But this action was more than instinct. It was choice. The humans chose to suffer for others. No species in Dravari history had done such a thing without gain. This behavior was not weakness. It was something stronger. The crew struggled to name it. They did not know the human word for courage in another region. A group of humans discovered one of the probes hiding near a river. It was buried under leaves, but its lens had been exposed. A child noticed the blinking light. The child called to others. They approached the probe without fear. They touched it, examined it. They brought tools and tried to open it. One adult warned the others to stay back. Another tried to speak into the device. They thought it might be watching. The probe sent signals back to the ship. The humans did not attack. They studied. They tested. They treated the unknown with curiosity instead of panic. The crew was surprised. On most worlds, first contact ended in fear or violence. Here it ended in questions. The Dravari now faced something they had never seen. A species that lived on a deadly planet not only survived but controlled it. A species that used no natural armor yet stood strong against storms. A species that felt pain but moved forward with purpose. A species that did not run from unknown threats but reached toward them with open hands. The commander stood before the observation screen and stared at Earth. The blue planet spun slowly beneath the stars. Fires glowed in the night. Lights from cities formed. Patterns. Ships moved across oceans. Creatures moved across mountains. The world breathed like a giant beast. And humans lived on its back without fear. A voice on the ship asked what would happen next. Another said they should report back and wait. A third suggested invasion. The commander said nothing. He turned and looked at the crew. Warriors trained for war. Scientists trained for truth. All of them silent. All of them watching Earth with the same thought. They dared not speak. This was no ordinary world. This was not a place to be conquered easily. This was a place where something ancient and wild had taken shape in human form. This was a place that might change everything. The Dravari believed. The commander walked to the central console and gave an order. Hold position. Watch longer. Make no move until more is known. He knew this mission was no longer about study. It was now about understanding something the Dravari had lost long ago, something they once had when they too fought storms and fire. Story of the humans was not just survival, it was something greater. It was defiance, clash of worlds. The Dravari ship remained hidden beyond the reach of Earth's detection systems. Time passed, but silence held every corner of the vessel. The crew no longer spoke in arrogance. Their voices no longer carried pride. They only watched. They watched how humans lived and how they fought. They watched how they cried and how they stood again. Every moment recorded became a lesson. Every human action became a question. The Dravari could not answer back on the Dravari homeworld. The high command grew impatient. They demanded results. They asked why the humans had not been claimed. They ordered the commander to advance, show power, test the humans, send a message. The commander obeyed. He ordered a full expedition, more ships, more soldiers. This was not war. Not yet. But the galaxy would feel the weight of the Dravari again. The fleet moved like a shadow toward Earth, hidden behind cloaks in silence. Their approach was slow but steady on Earth. Telescopes picked up something unusual. The stars blinked in, patterns that did not belong to nature. Radar picked up strange signals above the upper atmosphere. Earth's agencies went on alert. Governments began to speak with urgency. Experts watched the skies and spoke in private rooms. Fear spread like wind across the surface, but it was not panic. It was preparation. The humans had learned from every threat they ever faced, from disease, from storms, from their own mistakes. They had learned to adapt fast. And now they saw something coming from beyond their sky, something unknown. They did not wait. They built. They planned. They united in secret underground bases and floating sea platforms. Humans activated defenses. Built for the day the stars brought danger. Old rivals joined hands, borders opened. Scientists shared their work without delay. Soldiers from many lands trained side by side. The world had been divided before, but now stood as one when the Dravari fleet entered Earth orbit. They saw something unexpected. Earth was not confused. Earth was not blind. Earth was ready without a word. The humans launched warning signals into space. Pulses of energy meant to say one thing: we see you. We know you are here. Come forward or stay away. The commander ordered a small team to descend, not to attack but to observe. The landing zone was chosen far from cities, a wide desert with nothing but sand and heat. No human life was expected there. But when the Dravari transport ship touched the surface, they found a surprise. Humans were already waiting. They wore armor built not from metal alone, but from thought and fear. Their suits looked simple, yet each piece had purpose. They carried weapons not known to the Dravari, guns shaped by strategy, tools shaped by history. They did not raise their arms in greeting, nor did they fire. They stood still, watching the Dravari step forward. One spoke in their own language. The humans did not answer. Another tried again using signals. The humans responded with calm precision. A message played on a device. A voice spoke in many languages. Welcome. Identify. State purpose. The Dravari team returned to the ship with recordings. The commander listened. He felt something new in the human voice. Not fear. Not aggression. Control. The humans were not reacting. They were choosing every move. High command demanded action. The commander hesitated, but orders were orders. He approved a second team, this time with military gear, just in case the second landing ended in confusion. The humans were not there anymore. The place was empty, but the land had changed. Holes in the ground, burned stone, tracks of heavy movement. The humans had vanished but left signs of their presence. It was a message again. We are fast. We are watching. Do not try to understand us by force. Tension grew on the Dravari ship. Warriors grew restless. Scientists argued. The commander stood between two storms. Wait or strike, and then the humans made their move. A pulse of energy spread through space. A code buried in the signal. The Dravari ship's systems slowed. Lights flickered. Screens went dark. For 3 heartbeats the ship floated blind. Then the systems returned. But something had changed. A file now appeared on the main console. A video. It showed human cities, factories, launch pads, soldiers training, engineers building. The final part of the video showed a message in the Dravari language, not translated, not guessed. Written with perfect grammar: we survived our world. We will survive yours. The crew stood in silence. For a species to break into Dravari code and leave a message meant one thing. The humans had already touched their systems, already understood their way of thinking, already stepped into their shadow. The commander slammed his fist against the panel. The humans had outplayed them, without war, without fire, with strategy and patience. Back on Earth, leaders gathered in secret. They had captured one of the first probes. From its remains, they learned enough to build a map of the approaching threat. They knew more would come. Maybe not today, maybe not soon. But the stars had opened, and something waited in them. Humanity had to be ready, so they did what they always did. They learned, they built, they prepared. In the far orbit of Earth, the Dravari ship turned away. The commander gave no order to attack. He sent a final message to High Command. This is not the enemy we expected. This is not the prey we imagined. Humans are not to be measured by size or strength. They are to be measured by will. The message ended. Therefore, the first time, the galaxy's most feared warriors had stepped back, not because they could not fight, but because they did not understand what they had found. The turning point Earth did not forget. After the Dravari ship turned away and vanished into the stars, the world below did not return to silence. Something had changed. Something had awakened. Humanity had always watched the sky with wonder. Now they looked up with awareness. The stars no longer held only beauty, they held the unknown. And the unknown had already knocked at their door in secret places across Earth. Minds began to work without rest. Scientists, leaders, soldiers, thinkers, all driven by the same thought. If one species could reach them, others could too. And not all would leave without a fight. Humans could not remain unprepared. They had survived fire, ice, and war for centuries. Now they had to survive. The galaxy. Pieces of Dravari technology taken from the downed probe were being studied by top minds. Slowly, secrets unfolded. Power systems unlike anything known. Materials stronger than steel, but lighter than bone. Language. Scripts that twisted logic and mathematics. These pieces were keys. Keys to something far greater. Soon after, human satellites began to shift. Not in orbit, but in purpose. Devices once used for weather and communication now watched deep space. Patterns were drawn, movements tracked. Shadows in the stars were no longer ignored. Every flicker, every pulse, every unexplained signal was recorded. Humanity became a hunter watching the jungle from behind still leaves. Earth's militaries also changed. Armies no longer trained only for land and sea. New units were formed, silent forces with eyes on the stars. Engineers designed weapons not for this world, but for airless silence. Ships once meant for transport were upgraded with shields, signal blockers. Even the way humans spoke changed. Words like Protocol Alpha, Red Void, and Orbital Breach became part of common speech in secret halls. Not everyone believed the danger was real. Some thought the Dravari were just explorers. Others believed the humans had misunderstood the visit. But those who had seen the raw data knew better. The look in the eyes of the crew, the tone of their voice, the way they turned away without a word. That was not peace. That was unfinished business. The Dravari High Command received the final report from Earth with cold eyes. Their pride had been wounded. The commander who had stepped back was removed without ceremony. A new leader was chosen, one without doubt. One forged in fire and raised without fear. Orders were clear. Earth must be tested again. This time not with whispers, but with fire. The fleet that moved now was not for observation. It was designed for war. Ships with claws instead of wings. Weapons that burned stone. Engines that howled like beasts. They traveled fast through space, leaving behind trails of silence. No light, no message. Only the soundless promise of violence. Earth saw them coming before they arrived. The new network built after first contact gave early warning. No longer did humans need to guess. They knew how to read the sky now. The stars spoke and Earth listened when the fleet entered range. Human defenses activated. Not with fear, with purpose. Shields formed across major cities. Weapon systems locked onto space above. Civilian ships were grounded. Airfields turned dark. Command centers went underground. In secret bunkers, people sat before screens, calm and ready. The Dravari ships did not wait. They began with a direct strike aimed at a desert base. A test, a warning. But the base was empty. What the fleet hit was a decoy, a shell of steel and signal. The real base was far beneath a mountain, untouched, and listening human fighters launched. From hidden runways, fast, small, sharp. They moved not like prey, but like wasps. They did not charge. They danced. Every move planned, every shot placed with care. They did not fight with numbers. They fought with minds on board one Dravari ship. A young soldier watched the battle unfold. He had trained all his life to believe in Dravari strength. But what he saw was different. He saw machines that moved like animals. Humans who smiled in danger. Plans that bent reality. He felt something he had never felt before. Respect. As the battle grew, more humans joined the fight. Not to destroy, to defend. They did not chase the enemy. They stood their ground. They protected their land. Every fallen ship was recovered. Every injured fighter was lifted. Even in war, they showed unity. No one left behind. The Dravari fleet began to lose control. Their systems jammed, their signals confused. Their engines pulled into false gravity fields. Human tech had grown, not by chance, by effort, by need. They had learned. From every scrap of metal, every line of code, they had turned weakness into strength. In the middle of the fight, one Dravari pilot crashed. His ship hit the ocean and sank deep, but he did not drown. He was pulled from the wreck by human divers. He was brought to land, not to prison. To a clean room. They gave him air, water, a translator. They asked questions, not threats, not torture. Just questions the pilot did not understand. This was not how war was taught. Enemies were to be erased. But the humans spoke to him with calm words. They showed him recordings. They told him about Earth, its pain, its people, its strength. They showed him the scars of their own mistakes. And still they stood tall. The pilot began to speak in return, first in defense, then in confusion, then in honesty. He spoke of orders, of fear, of pride. The humans listened, not to gain control, but to understand. When news of this reached the rest of the Dravari fleet, something cracked. Not a ship, not a weapon, a belief. Young warriors questioned the command. Some refused to fire. Others stood in silence. A whisper moved through the fleet like wind through trees. Maybe the humans were not the enemy. Maybe they were the mirror, and in that mirror, the Dravari saw not weakness but truth. The battle ended without a final blast. A signal was sent. A retreat was ordered, not by command, by choice. Ships turned and faded into the stars. Earth watched them go, not with joy, not with pride. With quiet understanding, the humans knew this was not the end, but it was no longer the same war. It had become something else. A new reputation. The stars grew quiet after the retreat. No ships crossed Earth's orbit. No signals came from the dark beyond. But Earth did not rest. Humans knew silence in the sky did not mean safety. They continued building. They continued watching. Beneath the calm surface, the world had changed forever. Deep in the mountain bases, leaders from many nations gathered. Screens lit up with data from the last encounter, satellite footage, energy readings, translations from captured transmissions. Across the table sat men and women once divided by flags and borders. Now they worked as one mind, one voice, not out of fear, out of understanding. On the other side of the stars, the Dravari fleet returned to their home, not in celebration, in silence. Their ships had not failed. Their weapons had not broken. But something stronger than war had pushed them back. The truth that humans were not prey. They were not weak. They were not simple. They were not afraid of death because they had lived beside it every day. The pilot who had been saved on Earth was not punished. He was questioned by his own kind. But his answers were not what they expected. He spoke of human courage. He spoke of how they chose mercy in the middle of battle. He spoke of how they saved a stranger from another world without asking anything in return. He said these words not with shame, but with wonder. Among the younger Dravari, his words sparked thought. Warriors trained to fight began asking questions. Students once taught only conquest began studying Earth's history. Some even tried to learn human languages, not to control, to understand. It started as curiosity. It grew into change. News began to move across other civilizations. Worlds that once feared the Dravari now spoke of Earth, of a blue planet that had turned back a fleet, of a species that came from storms and deserts and wild beasts, a species that had fought itself and still stood together, a species that looked soft but carried fire in its soul. Smaller empires started sending messages to Earth, not threats, invitations, They wanted to trade. To speak, to learn. The humans responded carefully. With caution, but not with closed doors. They chose their words with thought. They opened talks not with demands but with questions. They wanted to listen first. In one such meeting, a group of scholars from a distant moon asked what made Earth different. A human answered without pride. He said humans never stopped adapting. He said their greatest strength was not their weapons, but their will. He said every time they fell, they stood again. Not because they were told to, because something inside them refused to give up. This answer was shared across star systems. Some did not believe it. Some laughed, but others listened. And the more they learned, the more they wondered the Dravari High Command could no longer hold control with fear alone. The younger generation demanded change. They asked why peace had not been considered. They asked what was gained by war. They asked what was lost when pride was placed above reason. And for the first time in generations, the leaders of the strongest force in the galaxy had no answer on Earth. The captured Dravari technology became the foundation for something new. Ships were built not just for defense, for exploration. Humans wanted to see what else lay beyond the sky, not to conquer, to understand. The first human deep space vessel was launched with quiet ceremony. No grand speeches. Just a message sent into the void: we are here. We are listening. We are ready to meet without fear. That message reached far. It passed through systems both dark and bright. And it returned with answers. Not all were friendly, but some carried hope. Messages in strange symbols. Greetings from unknown voices. A call for peace from a world of glass oceans. A song from a planet that spoke in light. And then one day, another message arrived. This one came from Dravari space. It was not sent by the High Command. It was sent by a group of young voices, soldiers, thinkers, builders. They asked for dialogue. They asked to send a ship to Earth, not for battle. For understanding. The Human Council met. They spoke long and carefully. And in the end, they said yes. The Dravari vessel arrived weeks later, small, unarmed. It landed on Earth without guards. Its passengers stepped onto human soil with open hands. There was no parade, no weapons drawn. Only quiet eyes and calm steps. Humans met them in peace, not with trust. Trust had to be earned. But with respect, with patience, with a clear message. If you come with open hands, we do not close our doors. The meeting was short. Simple words exchanged. No big promises, no sudden peace. But the message was clear on both sides. A new chapter had begun. The galaxy watched. Other species now saw Earth not just as another world. They saw it as a power shaped not by fire alone, but by endurance, by survival, by unity born from struggle. The Dravari were no longer the only feared name in space. Another name now stood beside them. Not louder, not crueler, but firm. Unshaken Earth. And in the archives of the Galactic records, a new entry was written: humanity. Origin, Deathworld. Nature, unknown. Strength, extreme. Behavior, unpredictable. Risk level, maximum. Recommendation: engage with respect. The humans did not see this record at first, but when they did, they smiled. Not out of pride. Out of memory. They remembered how they were once broken, divided, lost, and now they stood not above others but among them, not as conquerors, as survivors. The story did not end with fire. It ended with understanding. The galaxy had feared Deathworlders, but they had not met humans yet. Now they had, and nothing would ever be the same again. The end.